Fed legacy, what we've developed is what we call your financial house, right? And what this is people that retire well have their money split up in three different buckets, right? And so, and what that looks like is this: it's one, the foundation, right? The foundation of a house is where, if the house were to blow down, that part of the house would be solid, right? That part won't be affected. That part will be stable, right? And so there's the same thing when it comes to your money, right? And even within your TSP, you want to have a portion that's protected. No matter what happens, market go up or down, that money is solid, right? And so you want to have that, right? And then you also want to have what we call the walls. The walls is the part of your retirement account that insulates you from outside factors, right? And so the two biggest outside factors that you're going to face in retirement, I'm going to go over all this in a minute, is inflation risk, and you're also going to run through tax risk, right? And so we all know you got to pay taxes. You can't avoid that, right? Now, what you can avoid is paying the maximum amount of taxes. You can reduce your taxes, but you can't avoid them altogether, right? Despite what people might say, right? You're going to pay them, but how you pay them, when you pay them, all that stuff is up to you and the strategy that you implement, right? And so that will goes into the wall section. If everybody can mute their phone, I'm still hearing people, but let me try to do it on mine. All right. So you can't completely avoid taxes, but again, you can control when you pay them, how much you pay, and that you could do that, right? And so that's what you want to make sure within your retirement account. You have the walls, the insulation pieces, right? And then the third layer is what we call the roof, right? I meet people all the time who say, Mr. Smith, I have 100% of my money in the G fund, or I have 100% of my money in an annuity that I put all my money in because I just don't want to ever lose any money, right? And I always say, like, I don't know if that's the wisest strategy, right? Because you want to make sure you have some level of growth because of big things like inflation. I mean, the cost of things change. And so you want to make sure your money continues to last throughout retirement. And so what I want to do is go through this with you. And so here's the house, but the foundation. But what I want to answer today is what's typically considered foundation money, right? What are some of the things that you want to include in that foundation, right? So legacy money, right? And so what that means is if you say, Mr. Smith, I want to, man, for sure, I want to leave my kids 100,000 apiece, or I want to leave my grandkids college money, and this is how much it's going to be. Then that money, that legacy money, you want to set that aside because, you want that to happen, right? And it could be for a variety of reasons. And that's some of the stuff we talk about in our sessions, right? Next thing, I mentioned this the other day, Laura mentioned it the other day, right, is another thing you want to have in your foundation, right, is the self-funded long-term care, right? As you all know, the government doesn't offer long-term care anymore. And the main reason why they stopped offering it with John Hancock was because with any long-term care policy, unfortunately, the premiums don't remain the same because inflation in the health space, the cost just keeps rising. And so John Hancock is like, well, we can't lock ourselves into a premium if we don't know what the cost of this care is going to be 20 years from now, right? And so the premiums change. And so the government was just like, hey, if you can't fix the premium, we don't want to offer this to our employees. And so that's how that whole thing fell apart, right? And so that which brings me to self-funded long-term care. Self-funded long-term care is, all right, I got, I want to make sure my care is met, and sometimes people might not need care, right? But in case it happens, I want to put $150,000 away or $200,000 away. That's just going to sit there in case something happens to me, right? And you want that money to be solid. You want that money to be there, right? Because again, that's how long-term care policies work anyway. They have a maximum spend on them, right? And so you can spend up to a certain amount. And once you spend up to that amount, then the policy is null and void, or they reduce your services tremendously, right? And so it's the same thing if you self-fund it, right? Except for you don't have to pay for it, right? You just got to have the money there, or you got to pay yourself first, right, to be able to get that amount of money there so you can sit it there. So that's something that you want to put into the foundation, right? Another thing is if you have income, a certain amount of income that you want to have outside of your FERS pension and your Social Security, like we talked about the other day. If you say, okay, you know, right now my FERS pension is, let's say your income between your FERS pension and Social Security is $3,000, but you really need 4,000, right? So then that $1,000 a month that you're going to get, you want to make sure that money is set aside in a place that's going to pay you repeatedly, and that's not affected by any outside factors, right? So that's another thing. And the estate plan, right? Again, if you want to leave, might not be money, but it could be other things. You want to make sure that is in that foundation as well, so that your money's not affected by the market, right? And so the next section of the house is the insulation, which is the walls, right? And this part here is where the most education comes from, right? And so what I want to do is, oftentimes, how many of y'all have ever heard the term like the G fund is like the safest place to be? How many of y'all have ever heard that? If you've heard that, just comment in the chat. Let's put one in the chat. Just I want to make sure that y'all are following, number one. And I just want to see how many of y'all have heard that term, that the G fund is a safe space, right? Okay, cool. So, okay, y'all following. So here's a chart of the G fund returns versus inflation rate, right? And so if you're familiar with what inflation is, again, and we talked about it the other day, is just the cost of things go up over time. And so here's a chart over the last, from 2014 to 2022. And as you see, inflation has gone up tremendously, whereas the G fund has continued to stay the same. So this gap right here is just buying power, right? It's the cost of your groceries, the cost of an oil change, it's the cost of gas and electric, is the cost of things, right? And so if you have 100% of your money in an account like this, but inflation is growing, then what is going to happen to your money? It has less impact, right? 10 years from now, you still haven't lost anything as far as negative in the account. But when you need a procedure or something happens that's a major expense, you're going to end up paying double the money because your money hasn't grown at the rate of inflation. And so this is why in the insulation aspect of the financial house, you want to make sure the way in which you're investing in your TSP is in a way that can combat inflation, right? Because of charts like this. Now, the next thing is taxes, right? When it comes to inflation, I mean, the insulation of a financial house, you want to make sure you're protected from inflation and taxes. So a question I have for you all on the call is, how much of the money in your TSP is yours versus the IRS's, right? And you probably don't know, right? And that's common, right? And that's okay. But just know, if you have 500,000 in your TSP, a big chunk of that, probably a six-figure chunk of that, is the IRS's, right? They're getting their money back, right? And so you can't prevent that, but what you can do is lessen the amount, and you can also control the timing in which it happens, right? And so here's just a tax, and work with me. I'm trying to get better with Canva, right? I wanted to add this slide at the last minute, but this is just a tax bracket chart, right? And these tax bracket charts change from time to time, right? And so one of the things with this is if you look in here, and you can kind of see that most people fall in the mid-range, but and this is the different categories, right? But you can control this based on when you take income, right? And so one of the strategies that we do is we do what's called a Roth conversion, right? That's one of the most common ways in which, and I can illustrate this at the end when we do questions. One of the things in which we do is we work with the tax brackets, right? And you do what's called a Roth conversion. And what that is when you retire, you start taking some of the money that's in your TSP, traditional TSP, and converting it over to the Roth, right? But the way in which you do, or in a Roth, it's no the Roth, but a Roth. It could be the TSP Roth, it could be outside Roth, it could be, any type of Roth though. But when you do this, you take a certain amount up to your tax bracket limit. So like if you're at the 22% tax bracket and you look at your income between, and if you're married, your taxable income is right at that limit. Let's say you have $30,000 before you're at the next tax bracket limit. Then what you could do is you take 30,000 or 25,000. I'll just give yourself a little bit of breathing room every year just to keep yourself in that tax bracket. That way you're paying taxes at the current tax bracket. Because what you don't want to do is, and the mistake a lot of people make, is they let their money sit in their TSP and grow, because the TSP is going to continue to grow. And then when it comes time to pay your RMDs, you end up paying taxes on a higher amount because your account is growing, right? And so if you could start making those small Roth conversions when you first retire within your current tax bracket, then you lower the amount of taxes that you pay, right? And so here's the RMD chart. And again, I know some of this stuff is very complex, but I'm trying to, I want to break it down to you all so you can kind of understand it, right? So, okay. So this is an example of RMDs, right? And RMDs is required minimum distribution. It's basically a forced tax, right? So if you have your money in a traditional account, then traditional TSP, then when you turn 72, in most cases, it varies based on a couple of factors, but in most cases, once you turn 72, the government is going to force you to start withdrawing some of that money and make you pay taxes on it, right? And so this is an example here of somebody that had 500,000 in their TSP at a 22% tax bracket, right? And so this is how it looks. This is your, after that first year, they're going to send, and I put a 2% return on investment, right? So after that first year, they're going to take 20,000 out and they're going to send it to you, right? And this is the RMD, right? Now, this is the total RMD. Then what's going to happen is they're going to tax 4,300. That they're going to take that as taxes. You'll be left with the 15. In this example, right? Every example is different, but I just wanted to show you the overall concept of how it works, right? And so that just keeps happening. The older you get, the more they're taking, right? Because your life expectancy is greater, right? And so that's what happens, right, with the RMD, right? And so again, I could break this down to you on an individual level, but high level, this is how it works, right? And all this money here is money that's in a traditional account, right? If this money was Roth money, then none of this will happen. The money would just sit and stay the same and grow, right? But because it's traditional, they have to take these RMDs out because the government, IRS, wants the taxes for that are right here. Okay, you still get the net amount that still goes into an account of your own, but this is what you're paying in taxes. So in this case, that's $76,000 in taxes overall that was paid, right? And so again, the way to avoid this though is doing the Roth conversion early before this balance gets here, because they're taking a percentage of the balance, right? But if you do the Roth conversion early enough ahead of time, you pay a lot less in taxes. And if you want, you can set up a time and I'll run through like a Roth conversion scenario for you so that you can see what it would look like for you. But it's one of the smartest tax strategies that you can employ is a Roth conversion as soon as you retire within your current tax bracket. That way you're not paying more taxes than you normally would when you do it that way. So the next thing is stocks in the market, right? That's the roof of the financial house, right? And so when it comes to the stocks, of course, you get years like last year where the market goes down, you get years like 2008, and you don't want to be in retirement that happen, because you might not have the time to gain it back, but you still want to take some level of risk with some of your money, not all of it, but some of your money, right? And so there's a formula that we use and a lot of financial advisors use. It's called the prudent investor rule. Prudent means, just smart, right? Like how do you take risk and be smart about it, right? And so there's a rule where you take age 100 or the number 100 and you minus it by your age, right? And so if you're 55, that means 45% of your money you should have in the S&P index fund or some level of fund that's in the market, right? And then the older you get, of course, you just shrink that number down. The rest of the money should be in accounts like what we were talking about before, protected, but still have some level of growth, right? And so, but these are growth accounts, right? And the reason why that's important is because look around you, right? If you look at the C fund and the TSP, these are the companies that they're invested in, right? I'm sure, this morning you've probably interacted with at least 3 or 4 of these companies already this morning, right? So these are big companies that are growing, and you want to have some level of investment in companies like this to grow your money, right? Because as these companies grow, your money grows. And so you want to be able to participate in that. Maybe not all your money, but at least some of your money. You want to make sure you have invested in companies like that. The next aspect of the TSP is what I like to call the 3 I's of income. And the reason why this is important is because, I get the question all the time where it's like, Mrs. Smith, do I take income from my TSP? What do I do? Now, you don't necessarily have to take income from your TSP. If you're until it gets to the RMD aspect of it, where you start to take things from your TSP, but you don't have to take a check from your TSP if you don't need it, right? But if you do take income from your TSP, there's what we call the 3 I's of income, which is the inception period, the interval, how frequently you take it, and the interchangeability. How much can you change the payments, right? So, one of the questions I get all the time is, well, Mrs. Smith, once I start the payment, can I stop it? Yeah, it was some you can. So if some you cannot, the ones you cannot is when you get a lifetime annuity, right? So if you look at your TSP statement, there's a box on there and it shows you an amount. If you were to take that one, then you can't change that. Once you take it, you can't stop it, right? That's just how it works. It's supposed to last your entire life. I mean, they average it out to like age 120. And so they spread it out that long to protect themselves. But those type of annuities, you can't stop, right? But there are certain other annuities you can, right? Where they do period certain. Well, that means you take the money for 10 years, a certain portion of your money for 10 years, and you can stop it. But with those type of annuities, you can stop and start. Even if you agree to 10 years, you can stop it, right? There's more flexibility, right? And that's that's what I would advise in most cases. But again, especially with federal employees, because you already have a lifetime annuity with your pension. And so that's just something to think about, right? And so I always tell this story, all my presentations, because it's such a real story and it's something that can happen to any of us, right? And so 2 stories, 2 sisters, 2 different retirements, right? Because money just works this way, right? And so in this example, there's 2 sisters, both had 500,000 in their IRA when they went to retire. Both took $30,000. Both took $30,000 a year annually. One retired in 2010. One retired in the year 2000. And the importance of this story is why you shouldn't have all your money invested into the market for this reason, right? Especially the money, again, the income you're going to receive, because the income you want to receive should be in a foundation type of account that's protected, right? And so here's an example. So here's Jane. She retired in 2010. When she retired, the market was good, right? And this is a concept called the sequence of returns, right? And so when Jane retired, the market was great, right? The market returned positive results her first 3 years, 4 years. And that's just how the market returned during that 10-year period. Now, after that 10-year period, even though she was taking 30,000, she ended up with 874,000, which is great, right? But her sister, on the other hand, Jill, retired in 2000. The market didn't start off so great for her, right? But the market still ended up doing okay her last 7 years. But because the market went down the first 3, she was left with 96,000 invested in the same type of accounts, right? But just different time period, right? And so when it comes to your money, you want to make sure your money's in different buckets for this reason. The income bucket needs to be a protected bucket. You can have the growth bucket in another bucket, but your income is if you're taking income from an account that you're invested in like this, every time you sell a share, because that's what you're doing with income. Every time they take the income out, they're selling shares every time. And if you're selling shares at the bottom of the market, it's going to reduce your income significantly. And you really can't control this, right? This is all about the timing of the market. And so this is why having money in different buckets for different functions works really well. I'm gonna stop there for questions right now. I have other things I want to go into, but I know you all probably have questions, and this is a lot of numbers and things like that. So I want to make sure that I'm answering any questions while I'm here. Any questions y'all have about anything I just said?
You mentioned the required minimum distribution when retired.
Okay.
Is there something that can be done while still working if you have a traditional TSP account rather than a Roth account?
You mean the Roth conversion? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, what I'm asking is there any way to anything I can do right now to minimize the taxes I would pay on the money that's currently in my TSP? You
No.
mentioned
I,
you were okay. You mentioned the RMD when retired. Is there anything I can do now rather than waiting until I retire?
no, I'm gonna show you why, right? That's a good question, Donna. So this is just a sample client we created. But I'm gonna show you why, right? So when we run these reports, we have your taxable income here, right? And this person is still working. So let's say, this person is working, making 170. This is a real client. We just changed the name, right? But like 172,000, they're working and they're retiring. Well, they retired, right? In this example. And so let's put this out to 2025, right? And so let's say she tried to do, and then she has 100% of her money in the traditional TSP, right? Okay. When we do the Roth conversions, we would have to take income, right? And if we took income, because every time you take a Roth withdrawal, right? Every time you do a traditional, every time you take money from your traditional TSP, it's counted as income, right? And so if you're making, like, let's say your salary is in this tax bracket here, right? Of 95 to 182 while you're working. It's harder to do because it would take you over that tax bracket, if that makes sense. It will increase the amount of taxes you make while you're working. It's much easier to do when you're retired and you're in these lower tax brackets. Does that make sense? I hope I didn't overcomplicate that.
That does make sense. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, that's why it's easier to do. This is not the best example because our salary is so high, but like it's easy to do when you retire, because once you retire, you're going to drop down to the 22% tax bracket. Typically, most people do. If you're in a smaller state with no taxes, then some people drop down even to this 12%. And so then we do the Roth conversion by fitting the Roth conversion into this tax bracket, and that way that person's paying 12% on those TSP withdrawals. Or if they're in this tax bracket, then we try to get it to where it's okay. We're going to keep you under 95,000. We say your pension and your Social Security have you at an income of around 80,000 or 70,000. Then we take 25,000 or 15,000 and do the Roth conversion per year, but it keeps you in this tax bracket. It makes sense.
It does, yes.
Yeah. Most people working are in this tax bracket in the government, at least that we run into for the most part. And so, you just don't want to run that risk while you're working of increasing your tax bracket. And then you have so many more moving parts while you're working. It's just harder to do. Any other questions about what we talked about so far?
So basically, just to understand, William, when you do the Roth conversion after retirement, you're basically taking the difference of the amount of income that you're receiving. Say, for instance, if you're in the 95,000 tax bracket, I get 60,000 in my pension, Social Security. You take about 30,000 and move that to the conversion. That's how we can determine how much the conversion would be.
Exactly. Because you stand in that tax bracket. You stand in that 22% tax bracket. And then we run the individual scenario. It's much easier to see how much you save in tax because we can do the comparison. But that's it. And then you just do that because if say you retire at 62, right? You got until 72 to convert as much as you can from your traditional TSP into a Roth account, right? Because once you get to 72, they're going to start taking the money anyway. They're going to start taking it, and they're taking it based on the balance you have in traditional money. So if we can convert as much of that money over as possible, it doesn't affect you much tax-wise at the end of the year. The net is still sitting in an account for you. I mean, it's just going to be in another Roth account. And then the strategy there is to grow that anyway. So you're still trying to grow that, but you're paying the taxes now and you're controlling what the IRS gets, rather than just what most people do is they just wait, and then the RMD comes, and now they've waited. Now they started off with 500,000, but their money has grown. Now they got 800, and then they're paying taxes on that 800 when they could have just did the Roth conversions earlier, piece by piece by piece, and kept. And then another thing that happens too when you wait that long is now you're at 800,000. There's a formula for the RMD, and so they might send you $50,000, and that's going to take you over your tax bracket. You see what I'm saying? And so you have no control at that point, because it's just like they're like, all right, well, you know this is based on what you have. This is how much we got to send you, and and if it takes you over your tax bracket, it takes you over your tax bracket. There's nothing you can do at that point. But the best thing to do is control it early by doing those small Roth conversions early. And then another thing to do too is while you're working, the strategy you can use while you're working is put more money into your Roth TSP so that account grows and your traditional isn't as big as it is, you know, and that's another strategy. But you have to keep the money that's in your Roth account. You have to start it. You have to have it for 5 years for you to get the tax benefits from it. That's something else. That's a key point. Any other question around?
Yes.
Go ahead, the other person.
No, you go ahead, ma'am. You go ahead.
Okay, I was going to ask a question about putting money in a Roth account while we're working, and it might be a little much to explain, but you said if I'm planning to retire in 2 years and I'm just beginning a Roth account, what's the drawback with the money in the 5 years you just mentioned?
There's no drawback. There's no drawback. Just know you can't touch the money for another 3 years.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it just like, so if you retired in 2, right? If you retired in 2, Donna, and then in year 3 you need that Roth money for something, right? Income, whatever. If you use it in year 3, you're not going to get the tax benefits. The account has to be open for 5 years for you to get that tax classification. Like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're not going to touch it, it doesn't matter. Just start it now, and then that helps you, because then year 6, you know, from 6 years from now, if you need to touch the money, you can. You know, you give yourself a head start. It's just for people that need that money. You know, just know that there's a 5-year time period on it. Is that clear, Donna?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So knowing you, I would do it. I would open up a Roth now, just so that when you do go to retire, we could start doing those Roth conversions, or you could start doing those Roth conversions. And that way, you know, you can beat the RMD.
Is the traditional required? Do you have to have both? Can you just have a Roth and not a traditional TSP account?
No, only thing. So you know, you can have you just can contribute to the maximum of what the TSP limit is about to be 30,500 January 1, and so you just have to contribute that amount. Now, what they match is going to go to the traditional, but
okay,
yeah, that's how it works. Okay, next question.
Well, this is Lars here. I want to just say thank you for the last 3 days during your seminar. My question is maxing versus catch up.
Okay.
Which is better to do? And I'm still working right now, and I'm maxing out on my TSP, but I want to know what's the difference between the maxing and catch up? Which is better?
Okay.
Should I max or should I catch up?
All right. So how old are you?
55.
All right. So catch up starts when you turn 50, right? And so you're able to do extra on top of what everybody else. I think it's $7,500 is the
$7,500.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, $7,500 is the catch up. So you got to first max out which is it's 20, what is it, 2,400 now? It's just 24, I think it's 24,000, I'm sorry. 24,000. Yeah. And so that's the most somebody that's 50 and below, 49 and below can contribute, right? The catch up is what's on top of that. So it's not a better, it's can you do it, honestly. I mean, obviously the better approach is to put as much as you can in, because it's your money, it's coming to you, right? If you can do it, do it. If you can't, you can't. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah, that makes
better,
sense.
it's not a better thing.
Pretty much what you're saying. If I can do it, do it. If not, at least try to max it out normally, if as much as you can.
Yeah. It's not a better thing, man. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just doing the most you can. Now there's strategies on how you invest it and all that type of stuff. But the amount, because all the money's coming to you at the end of the day.
Correct. So, okay. Yeah, because I've been following your strategies, and we have I'm investing mostly in the C fund and versus the G fund. But like I said, the market is not hasn't been good. That I would say the last 7 months. So
okay. That's good stuff, man. As long as you're not retiring next year, that's
no,
that's solid. Okay. Or 2 years,
yeah. Okay, thank you.
No problem, man. Anybody else?
Yes. When we talk about the tax bracket, so not only do I need to count my income, it also, if I'm filing jointly, it includes whatever retirement income my wife, that gets added in as well.
Yeah, same thing. So when we meet with married couples, this is just a single tax bracket right here, but we could make it a married. And so what we do is we add it'll change to married filing jointly. And it's the same thing. So couples do it too. So couples say, all right, well, how much we want to do in this Roth? And they open up, an account, and then they start doing the conversions that way. But it's the same way, same thing. Because both people working, you both running into the same issue. You both probably have 401ks or TSPs that are in the traditional sense, tax vehicle. And so you just got to do the Roth conversions that way.
Okay, well, only I have it, so.
So, if you're still filing jointly, it's still going. Your tax bracket is determined by how you file. So if y'all file jointly, then you're gonna fall into that regardless. Because that's all it is. It's just a tax strategy. Is because with the TSP, right? So, I'm dealing with a lot of clients now getting ready to retire, and they're taking money out of their TSP for to make sure they have the gap filled for that, because they don't know when they're gonna get their first checks, things like that. And so as you know, the TSP is automatically gonna take 20%. When you take money from the TSP, they take 20% right away, right? Now, people always ask, well, why are they taking so much? Well, they're taking that because that's a number they figured that's an average that's solid for them, right? OPM, whatever. But some people get money back, right? I'm like, don't worry, because your tax bracket is so low, you're gonna get money back when you do your taxes because they took too much out, right? Or some people, I'm like, they didn't take enough, you're gonna pay a little bit more later, even though they took the 20, right? But that's just how it works. But it's all determined based on your personal tax situation, is how much they take, right? And that's just what it's tied to. For your case, it'd be what your tax rate is with married filing jointly.
Okay, thank you.
Who am I speaking with? Who's that?
Lee.
What's up, Lee?
All right, how you doing, sir?
Good, man.
And I do got another question. So this kind of goes back to the gentleman question before me on 53.
Okay.
I commit enough to where it maxes plus it's the catch-up limit. So I max out every year. But I'm not putting anything into the Roth because I really didn't understand it until listening to you this morning. So say I'm putting 25% in. What percentage would you suggest that I put to start for the Roth of that 25% is all going to traditional?
Man, that's hard to say, right? Because it depends on your taxes, right? So like the reason why traditional is such a popular thing is because it reduces your taxable income, as you know.
And that's the main reason why I increased it so much, because even with the 25%, I'm still paying state and federal taxes out the wazoo.
Yeah, so that's so like in that case, you really got to talk to your accountant about it, because what'll happen is when you do the Roth, when you say I was like, yeah, man, do 12, right, 50%. Then what'll happen is your taxable income will go up. You see what I'm saying? And so then going back to these tax brackets, and I don't know what you have coming out of your tax, I don't know what your tax situation looks like, but your accountant does. Just say, hey, look, I'm thinking about putting this 12% into this Roth account. How will it affect me? And again, he or she's going to just look at the tax brackets and see, based on what your taxes were last year, and that'll be the determinant factor. That's how I work, and just tell them like, hey, look, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to put more, in my Roth account, so in retirement, I'm paying less in taxes. What other tax strategies do you have right now while I'm currently working, based on what you see in front, like based on my returns? Do you see that I can, different write-offs, different things like that?
Right. Well, I don't have an accountant. I kind of do it on my own. So my other thing is, say for instance, I have a Fidelity account of my own that's a Roth already.
Yeah.
So I think I heard you say earlier, it doesn't necessarily have to be the TSP Roth. I could transfer it to that.
Yeah, you can. The thing about the outside Roth is there's a limit on it, though.
Okay.
Like based on your income and all that, like there's a limit on how much you could put in, which is about $6,500.
Right.
Put into a Roth. But with the TSP, if they call that the 401k Roth, right? You could put up to the maximum 401k limits. So that's the benefit, and it's fairly new. It's like 10 years old. Like it's not something that's been around forever.
Okay.
But like
but I could utilize both, though, right?
Yeah, you could utilize both. You can utilize both. Yeah, but obviously the bigger amount is going to go with the 401k, Rob.
Okay, thank you. This is very knowledgeable information for me. And also, can I reach out to you?
Yeah.
I'll put because I don't have an account that's set up like where somebody where you guys do advising and stuff like that. Do you guys do that?
We don't do the
what I'm
account.
seeing now on the
We don't do
screen.
the account. I could talk to you about it, but we don't do the account stuff, the accounting thing.
Okay.
Anybody else have a question?
Mick, this is Tangent. Let me just confirm. Hi. So let's say if I'm gonna retire next year, and I'm gonna want to look at doing Roth conversion, in order to take money out of the Roth that I convert to, or I guess open up a IRA actually. I have to have that account open 5 years before I can take money out of it. Is that what you mentioned?
No, you can take money out of it. They're just not going to give you that. They're not going. It's not going to be considered non-tax though. Until the 5-year period. So you could take out. They just be like, all right, well, here's tax pay. You got to pay the taxes on it. You see what I'm saying? But just open up a Roth now.
I see what you're saying.
So here's the thing, right? So if you have all your money in traditional, that's fine. You can still take money out of traditional. Like you're just gonna pay taxes on it. But the Roth conversion is more so a long-term play, because when you turn 72, government's gonna start sending you checks anyway, right? Let me go back to this example over here. They're gonna start sending you checks, and this is just an example of somebody with a 500,000. The money, and I have some market participation in here, but they're gonna start sending you checks anyway, right? But this RMD number is a percentage of this number. And so every year they're taking a percentage. If you have this number, and this is traditional money, if you have this number lower, then the percentage is lower, so you're paying less in taxes. The Roth, does that make sense? Did that answer your question, Tangi?
Yeah. So I guess I would just kind of okay, so if I move money from a traditional to a outside IRA, okay, I don't have to pay taxes for that movement, because that's kind of like a transfer, rollover, whatever. But I guess when I get ready to convert it to the do a Roth conversion, that's when I pay taxes.
Yeah. So let's say you have $100,000. You're doing a rollover. All you're doing is taking a rollover. All it is taking money from a traditional account and roll it into another traditional account. That's it. So the taxes are the same. That's why you pay no taxes. But when you take that money, you put it into your Navy Federal account, or whoever you use, right? That's when the taxes come in from either account. You're gonna pay taxes from either account because they're both still considered traditional. It's really called qualified money. They're considered qualified money. Now, if you were to take that money, that same 100,000, and roll it over into outside Roth account, right? The traditional TSP to an outside Roth account, then you're gonna on your taxes that next year, you're gonna have $100,000 in added income as on your taxes, because that's $100,000 tax liability from doing it. That's why you want to do the conversion route. Well, that's considered conversion too, but it more so you want to be strategic in your conversion, where you do it piece by piece, so that you're not paying 37% in taxes one year. You want to keep it within your tax bracket, so you're still paying the same amount of taxes, so the tax hit's lower.
Okay.
Does that make sense to what you were saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. But a traditional rollover, that's common. That's we do those all the time. That's that's a whole nother strategy, but and how you do that, where you do it too. But the tax strategy is the Roth conversion. Any other questions? On any of this? Think we good? Okay. What I want to do now is I want to just go over the TSP funds, because a lot of times people have questions about these. And I want to break them down, right? So we all familiar with the G fund. The G fund, what it is just government bonds, right? And it's solid because you're not going to lose any money, right? Nobody likes to lose money. But the issue again is just the buying power aspect. And even on TSP site, they list it, as a potential warning. It's like the inflation risk that you run into by having, the G fund, right? And so, and then when you look at the returns over the last, the G fund's actually doing pretty decent this year. And the reason why it's doing decent at the 3.4%, which is much higher than the 10-year average, is because interest rates are higher, right? So because interest rates are higher, it's driving up the bond market, which is beneficial, to those that have that money in the G fund, because you're still getting higher returns. But you can still get those same higher returns in other IRAs and other places that are higher than this. But if you're within the TSP, it's a solid thing for right now, right? But again, just when you look at the 10-year, you run the risk there. Then there's the F fund, right? And the F fund is more so corporate bonds. And then just with the way, rates are, interest rates being higher, corporations' loans are higher. So that's why the F fund is kind of shot right now, because companies just aren't making their payments, and it's just harder for companies to lend money because they're not making money. And they owe a lot of money based on interest rates being higher. So the F fund typically never runs negative. Like, the F fund and the G fund are considered within the TSP, considered the safe funds, the cash funds. But the economy is in a weird space right now, and so you see now that the F fund has lost 2%, which is not something that typically happens. And in the last 5 years, it's been down 5%. But it used to be a really popular account, but now it's last 10 years is at 1%. I mean, it's just not doing well, at all. And it's mainly because corporations aren't doing well and interest rates being higher. Then you have the C fund, which is my favorite, which is the S&P 500, right? And so if you talk to most smart investors, what they'll tell you is put your money in the S&P index fund and let it ride out. Right, the S&P 500 index fund to let it ride out, and the reason why they say that is because the S&P is the top 500 companies in America, right? And so, you can go and invest your money in Nike, you can invest your money in Apple, you can invest in just different companies, but if that company has a bad year, then your money goes down, right? But if you have it spread out over the top 500, if one or two companies go bad, you're still okay because the overall economy will make up for it, right? And so that's why index funds are so popular. And that's why I love the C fund. Because if you look at it over the last 10 years, the C fund has returned 11%, right? Which is fantastic, right? But then if you look at the top 10 holdings within the TSP C fund, you know, you have companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and they change these out from time to time. And so last year, Facebook was in here, is not in here no more, right? Tesla was in here as well. That's not in here no more. So TSP does a good job of rotating what accounts are in, what companies are here. So, but they still try to keep, you know, solid companies. And so this is why this is my favorite fund. Not only that, the fees on it, when you think about this versus outside S&P fund, I mean, the fees are minimum 0.05%. Like, these are great fees when it comes to your investment. So when you hear people say, you know, take all your money out of your TSP and invest it somewhere else, right? Don't listen, right? Don't take all your money out of TSP. You could take a portion, like I mentioned, in those buckets, but taking all of it doesn't make any sense, right? The TSP, you're getting solid returns here to go along with the low fees that you have to pay. So that's the C fund. Then the S fund is small cap stocks, right? And so it's still large companies, but they're just not as large as the S&P 500, right? They're smaller companies. And so, you know, the return obviously is not as big, but, you know, still some solid companies in here. Uber's in here, Lululemon, Airbnb, you know, Block, this is Cash App and all those companies that are affiliated with them, like Square, Cash App, the same thing. You know, yeah, so I mean, you know, you're getting solid returns, but again, like I said, the S&P 500, the top 500 biggest, you know, last 10 years, this one did 11. I mean, the S&P C fund did 11, this one did 7. In the last year, this one lost, you know, 1%, but, you know, that's how the C fund works. I mean, S fund works, is the small cap stocks. And then the I fund, which is international fund, is just invested in emerging economies, right? And so, you know, over the last 10 years, this one returned 3. The last year did pretty good. But again, you want to look at the last 10-year average. And then some of these are the bigger companies overseas. Any questions about those top 5 individual funds or those 5 individual funds? I don't know if anybody's ever walked y'all through that before, but we got about 7 more minutes. I want to make sure I answer any questions around that. Any questions around that? That pretty clear? Okay, cool. Then you have your life cycle funds. And then your life cycle funds are just the 5 individual funds invested differently based on the amount of years you have to work, right? And so let's look at the L2030, right? A lot of people's money's in the L2030 right now. And so the L2030 is just the 5 funds, but invested in a certain way, right? So you got, you know, they got 30% in the G, 5% in the 6% in the F, 31% in the C, and then 7, and you know, and then the closer you are to retirement, the more money they're gonna start putting towards the G, right? And so if you look back, let's say 2050, right? 2050 is only 10% in the G, 41 in the C, 28, you know, so you have bigger sums of money in the CS&I. And the CS&I are considered equity funds. What that means is they're invested in the actual stock market, right? Companies, right? Even though this is the index, but it's invested in the indexes that track companies. Whereas the F and the G are invested in the bond market. So it's far more conservative, right? And so you know, you don't have much loss in these, even though the F fund has lost these last couple of years. It's not supposed to. That's why, you know, the economy's in a weird place, because the bond market typically doesn't lose. But these are the equity funds. And so again, if you want to be more risky, take it out further. You know, the further out you go, the more risk it is. The closer you are to retirement, the more conservative that mixture will be. Any questions on this? Otherwise, I think we had a good challenge. I'm gonna send you all a link to my calendar. I'll put it actually in the chat right now. If you want to book a call, just use this link here, and we can sit down and talk about different things. Let me show you. So this is what we cover when we meet one-on-one. Is we cover the you know, federal benefit optimization. Let me make this bigger. Hold on. Federal benefits optimization. What that is we're talking about your FERS pension, your SSI, how to optimize that. Saving can be included in that, different things like that. Vesting your TSP properly, making sure you get on the right track as far as investing that right. We make sure we do that with you. Make sure you get that right mix. Navigating tax efficient strategies. That's where the Roth conversion comes in. You know, that's one of our major strategies, because that's, you know, that impacts you the most, making sure that's set up properly. Make sure you got the right type of insurances, asset protection with long-term care, things like that. Making sure that you have a solid long-term care strategy in place, especially the self-funded way. I think that's the way to go if you can afford it, right? Because, you know, you might not need long-term care. Why pay all that money for something that you don't use, especially if you can fund it yourself? And it's not as hard as you might think. So we help you with that. Making sure you take the right amount of income. Again, that can go into the tax strategy as well, but making sure you're taking the right amount of income, making sure your expenses are set up in a way that allows you to take the right amount of income. And then healthcare, medical stuff. Like, we help planning that type of thing, that type of care. And again, that goes back into the long-term care strategies. But yeah, if y'all want to book a call, feel free to book a call. No, I don't have any. No. We could talk, Donna, for sure. For sure. But yeah, if you want to book a call, just book a call. We'll talk. Other than that, I'm gonna enjoy my Saturday. I appreciate everybody. I'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you.
No problem.
One last question before you leave.
Go ahead.
I missed, this is Burrow.
What's up, bro?
And hey, I missed some and part of other sections. Do you have these recorded?
Yeah,
somewhere?
I'll send them out, man. I'll send them out.
Okay.
One of our
Okay.
people that does that is out this week, had a family emergency, so I've been slow to respond to that stuff. But we'll get it out to you by Monday for sure. Well, by close of business Monday, because she'd be back.
Okay. But thank you for all that you do, and it's really appreciated.
No problem. Sherry, I saw you had your hand up. You had a question, Sherry?
Yes, I did, and I know I joined late. I have a question about the life cycle. Like, I'm in, I have G, F, C, and S, but I have the life cycle 2030.
Yeah.
If you retire prior to your life cycle, like I plan on retiring probably in 2026, is there like a limit or a restriction that I could not withdraw the money until 2030? How does that work?
No, that doesn't have nothing to do with it. It's just how they invest it based on that. It's an investment target date. It's not a limit on how you can invest. That's a really good question though. But like, no, it's not.
Okay.
It's just a target and how they invest it.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. All right. Thanks. That's all I need to know.
Okay. Any other questions though? Okay. All right, y'all. If y'all need anything, I put my link in the chat. Just book a call on there and we'll talk. All right, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.